Toi te ara puoru, sounds.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, raurangatira mā tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to He Reo Tawhito, presented by Toi Te Ara Puoru. Sounds, Centre for New Zealand Music, ko Crystal Edwards ahau. It's been a great honour to speak with some of our leading experts on ngā mōteatea. Today we're joined by Ngā Hiwi Apanui. Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai piki mai, nau mai kake mai ki He Reo Tawhito. Tino wai Mariana tātou ka noho tahi ki tētahi nana kia no tewi o ngā Ngāti o tira ka tahuri atu tātou i nā ia nei ki tēnei o ngā tangata tēnā koe Ngā Hiwi. E pēhea ana koe?
Te wā ahua tonu, kāre no kia himo. Atahi rā pēr.
Kāti kau e koe pe kōrero pēna, ka aha te iwi Māori mena ka pērā koe.
Me katakata, koina te rongoa pai, ne?
Koina.
Te taumaha ki te raruraru koe, ana ko te katakata titahi āhuatanga whakamāmāke i te wairua.
Tika hoki rawa atu koe e hoa. Nā reira, e kōrero ana koe mo te katakata, and we take it back to sometimes our most earliest memories where we laughed so much e hoa. I roto i te rāwa i te wā e taitamari ki tonu koe. He aha wetahi o ngā influences i tau mai ki roto i a koe, kia puta i te koengo nui rawa atu ki ngā waiata koraua, waiata mōteatea, waiata tawhito rāne.
I au e whitu taupea te pakeke, i hunuku mātou mai te aroa ki te kāinga te whare rānei o tō mātou tipuna āpiata. Tō mātou māma, tō mātou kōka, ana ka haere ki rua tōria mahi ai. Nā, ko te tikanga i e ka tae atu ki reira, nā te mea mahi ai i te rā katoa, ka mahue māua ko taku tuahine i te kāinga o tō mātou tipuna pāpā āpiata. Tēnei tangata tonu, ahakoa tōna paku, rima pūtu pēr tōna teitei, he tangata matatau rawa atu i haere ki te whare wānanga o Cambridge i Rānana, ki te whai i tana tohu, nā te mea he āpiha o ki anō ai i roto i te ope tuatahi. Nā ka haere ki te pakanga tuatahi, ka haere ka puta i Karipori, ka hoki mai ki te kāinga mahi pāmu ai, he kaipura i whutupora anō hoki aia, mo te tīma Māori, mo te tīma a ōpango anō hoki i te wā o te pakanga. Engari he kuraua tino kaha ki te manaki i ngā tāngata katoa. Te pōtuatahi noho māo ko taku tuahine ki reira, nā te mea i roto anō hoki te tangata nei te ope hoia, ka tonoa māua kia haere ki te moi i te ono karaka i te pō. Whiti tonu ana te rā, nā ka noho māua ki tō mā moenga ana ka titiro ki waho, whiti tonu ana te rā. Te iwa karaka, ka pō te ao, ne? Ka tahi ka waiata mai te kraura. I āna waiata mōteatea, i āna waiata hoia, ka tūtai trau māo ko taku tuahine. Po he māo ko tai mai te kihui ki tō mātou whare. Engari, i roto i ngā wiki, tata nei ana karata māo ki aua waiata. En koe nei pēr i puta i taku tino hiehie, tino aroha no hoki, ki tērā momo waiata. He momo whakaahuru, i roto i te pō kere, rongai māua i aia e waiata ana ka tahi ka tau te wairua. Me te a tāhua o ngā rangi, ka me etahi he monotone kē tērā. Engari ki au, ka rongo au i te wairua o ngā kupu, ka rongo au i te wairua o te tangata e waiata ana, me te oro o te pāpara, he pahu kē tōna reo. E harei te reo teitei, te reo teotua rane, he pahu kē te tangi mai o tana reo. Nā reira i tau ai māua i roto i o māu moenga, ana ka tere moe. Engari ka mea ka tino waia, tino taunga ki e rā momo mahi i te pō, te rongo i te waiata, ka tahi ka tau, ka marire taku moe.
Ātāhua e hoa, ātāhua. Atu i tērā koraua, me e rā atu i roto i tō whānau. Who else are some other waiata tawhito composers that have influenced you on your journey as a musician?
Well, one of the interesting ones is we from Te Araroa, we still hold on to our memories of the siege at Whetumatera, which happened in the early 1800s. And my ancestor, Hine Tawhirangi, and her husband, Akaripa, were caught in Whetumatera and came out with two of their children, Hine Horahia and Te Hāmaiwaho. Now, once they'd gotten out of there, Te Hāmaiwaho, full of vengeance and probably wanted to, get one back on Ngāpuhi, went to live in Whakatane. And he fought with Ngāti Awa against Ngāpuhi. Well, not so much Ngāpuhi, but Pōmare. And he died there, but it was the manner of his death that really, motivated my great-great-great-grandmother to write the song called E Rangi Rāia. E Rangi Rāia I te rā tōrua. It wasn't like that when Wenuku made the sunset twice at Te Huri Pureata, which you know about and I know about, right? The vast waka that was built by Wenuku for his children, his chiefly children, was then sunk by one of them, and Paikea was the only one who got away. And so she talks about that. She talks about that in that way. Ko tahi te morihu I puta I te puru o te waka. Ko Paikea tērā, there was Paikea who got out. And she wrote other waiata too that were included in Ngā Mōtetea. And for me, I would like to think that I got some of that DNA, that she sent that down to me. And look, and it's consistent with the role the women in my life have played. I always think to myself, where would Ngāti Porou be without our amazing wahine rangatira? Because, it was my mother who got me through. It wasn't my dad. I think if I was had been brought up with my father, I quite possibly would have still been at home, indulging in some illegal substances, or dead, one of the two, or probably both, right? But my mother was the one who set the bar for my whole family. 10 children, all of us got school C, 7 of us got UE, and 5 of us got university qualifications, which isn't too bad for a solo mum, even now, right? And so I've got a huge debt to pay to my mother, and I remind my children all the time of the debt that they have to her, to really, exploit the advantage they've been given and the privilege they've been given of being middle-class Māori children, because there aren't a lot of them. And so I really, my aunties, for instance, I remember when I finished at university and I went home, and I joked to people I went home and got beaten up by my relations, but what it was, I must have looked like, they must have said, oh, look at this educated dick coming into our community. He's got his flash degree and thinks, bougie Māori and all this stuff. And I just didn't fit because, because I had different values. I, for instance, didn't want to hit my wahine. I think it was terrible. Those types of things. But, and I didn't smoke and I didn't drink. And that made me a real, what's that word that starts with W and sounds like anchor? I
thought I was thinking square.
And so I didn't fit in when I went back. But my aunties would look at me like I was, they were so proud I could feel it. My uncles, there's bloody ngahi we show off, right? But my aunties, oh, kia ora boy, kei te hakue boy, and it was lovely. And they're all gone now. But I still remember the love. So I think, when I look back at Hine Tawhirangi, I think about her, I think about my mother, I think about my grandmother too, who was 16 kids and was also the district nurse. And all the kōrero, all the stories about what a lovely and kind woman she was. My rangihuna grandmother. And look, I could go on and on about my wonderful aunties. Auntie Merihini, Auntie Merihini Waitoa, Koro Juza's sister, who was the total opposite of her brother. And I loved him too. I love Koro. But man, he could get grumpy. Whereas Auntie Merihini was just always kind and wise, and and it was it was heartbreaking when she died, and I went back to pay my tribute to her because I just loved her so much.
Yeah.
But but Hine Tawhirangi, I always look back to because it must have been heartbreaking to lose her son the way that she did, with Te Hāmaiwaho being killed, but then being gutted essentially. And having his entrails spread all over the rocks as a, way of disgracing him, I suppose. And so his mother wrote that song, E Rangi Rāia I te rā tōrua. O tahi te morihu I puta I te puru o te waka.
Ai.
And,
You talk about this waiata tawhito, which is absolutely fantastic, and it has been mentioned that these waiata tawhito, they're passed down through generation. They have this evergreen this last longing life of them. Hoi anō, these days, we can firmly say that waiata tawhito mō Tētia possibly is going through a bit of a change. Have you seen, do you feel that impact on waiata tawhito, and how does that make you feel? How does that make you perceive waiata tawhito for today compared to e rā waiata tawhito no mua rāno?
Yeah, well, a lot of the symbolism of the words, for instance, you know, I can remember there's a waiata there with he taiwhakatū ki tūpārua. And I'm wondering, what is the significance of a high tide at Tūpārua? You know, we don't know because we've lost that knowledge, right? And also we've lost generations and generations of reo speakers. And, you know, we're making a really, really, you know, spirited recovery now, which I'm really proud to be a part of. But I can remember my mother, you know, just sitting down and listening to her speak te reo and being just blown away by how easy and how lovely and how fluent it was. And then some of my other aunties too, Kate Walker. You know, I can remember one time I had to do, when I was running Radio Ngāti Pro, I had to do a restructure. And she comes in and she goes, "Ngahiwi." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Ahia koe kōrero atu ai ki o tāngata." And I went, "Oh, pōpō, I'll talk to them tomorrow, right?" And she goes, "Well, kia kōrero koe ki a rātou. Ke wareware I a koe, te hunga e tūtū nei I muri a rātou," right? And that was how she did it. And I'm just thinking, oh, listen to that. And then I said to her, "Oh, you know, well, I'm always thinking about their families." And she said, "I'm not talking, kareo te kōrero mo te hunga ora, kei te kōrero kia mo te hunga mate, nā te mea ko rātou tonu kei te pupuri I ngā taura." And I went, "Ooh." You know, I have to go and talk to these ghosts now, right? And she said, you know, and I said, "Well, me pehe taku kōrero, how should I talk to them?" And she said to me, "Well, you don't talk to them. You talk to their ancestors, and you don't speak English because their ancestors don't speak English. You speak Māori." And look, I've every time I've had to do a restructure, particularly, you know, I aue whakahaere ana I tētahi whakahaere Māori, that's what I do. I speak to their ancestors and it works. I don't know why, but it does. And I think it's probably because we believe that behind every one of us, I'm not just talking to you, I'm talking to you and the whakapapa people that goes right back. And some of them, including all my wahine, they're probably the same people. So it's you know, people often ask me, what's the difference between Māori and Pākehā? And I say, well, there are some, but the biggest one is we don't believe we own the land. We belong to the land. So the words no here koe don't mean where are you from. They mean where do you belong. And that's the difference. So this whole ownership of having freehold title, you know, it's really, really interesting. And you can see some of those things being explored, some of those differences now, those modern themes being explored in our modern mōtētia. And look, and just because we don't have the same command of te reo, or the reo has changed, it's still te reo. Te reo, any language adapts with each generation. And I can remember a speech that Apirana Ngata gave in Rotorua, where he said, the reo I speak now is not the same reo that my parents spoke, or my grandparents, or whatever. And yet we look at his reo and go, oh my gosh, isn't that beautiful, right? And there are these beautiful reo speakers all over the place. And there will be beautiful reo speakers in the future, probably more, as more and more people speak the language. So it's you know, it's when we look at mōtētia now, the language is different. You know, one of the things that cracks me up, because, you know, in my job at the Taurewhiri, we set the conventions for formal te reo Māori. Now, if you look at mōtētia, they break every rule. Mōtētia doesn't obey grammar, right?
Kao, tika.
You know, it's all part of being innovative and different. And I can remember somebody getting upset with me on a song because I left out an I. You know, that Mahuru song that we wrote back in 2020, well, we stole it from Earth, Wind and Fire, and we put our own words in there. And there's one line in there where we went, "Mana anō, tātou e kotahi," right? Because I didn't want to put I in there because it sounded dumb. "Mana anō, tātou e kotahi." Broke the vibe. And then I got told, but you should have put ka in there. And I said, no, it's two Ks in a row. Sounds dumb. No, tātou ka kota. Nah, dumb. Ka katahi, or whatever. It sounds a bit like that. And so I broke that rule. Oh, and I got heck for it, right? And but it's a song.
Yeah.
You're allowed to break rules. I mean, they do it all the time in English. I mean, some of the stuff we're trying to understand, you know, in English, when you write a song, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't follow grammar. It just is. And it fits the vibe. The woman who wrote the lyrics for that September song, she begged Maurice White to stop singing that. There's one bit in there, where's it goes? Yeah, but she said, well, look, you know, it's nonsensical and all the rest of it. And then she realised afterwards, it's the vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the vibe.
Now that you're mentioning about vibe and the infusing of kupu Māori into these waiata, and that over the years we're seeing that mōtetia actually is creeping into modern
Yep.
contemporary music now. Do you think, with your background and as a musician as well, that it could possibly be dismantling mōtetia?
Oh, look, it's nice to see that influence in other types of music, right? And the thing is, look, you look at somebody like Hedney Melbourne, for instance. A lot of those songs sound like mōtetia. And his whole voice is so, I'd hear his voice and go, wow, you sound like Papa, And people would say to me, oh, Sid can't sing. Oh, bullshit. Sid Melbourne had a beautiful voice. This really authentic Māori voice that I really loved. And I've heard a few people say, oh, Hedney couldn't sing. Of course he could sing. Mm-hmm. He's a beautiful singer with his own unique style. And there are others of us who will sing like, like a soulful diva from, or the male version of it from America. But we'll never be those people, right? Hedney will always be Hedney because his voice is so beautiful and so tūturu and so Māori, and without even trying. And actually, I've met a few of his whanaunga, and they've got the same voice. It's travelled down the whakapapa. It's beautiful, And these are the things, right? If our mōtetia influences other types of music and other musicians to use it, then that can only be a good thing. I mean, there are people who get a bit worried about, if, for instance, if we allow people to speak our ill, we're going to lose it. Oh, whatever, right? And I'll go back to your cousins up the East Coast, and without a doubt, I'll be asked, being Ahiwi B, what do you want those Pākehās to talk Māori for? And I said, what's wrong with it? Oh, well, they might steal the mana of our language. Oh, interesting, okay. How long have we been speaking English for? Oh, I don't know. Said, 1840, signing the Treaty of Waitangi, about 180 years, give or take a few, yeah. I said, damn, those Pākehās are tough, eh? Well, why is that? I said, we've been speaking their language for 180 years and we still haven't stolen the mana of it, right? It's a dumb argument. It's a stupid argument. Your language has mana when people speak it. And if and if they take elements of our culture and fuse it into other things, that's mostly a good thing. The only time it's not a good thing is when somebody takes the Te Reo Māori logo and prints it on a T-shirt in the USA and tries to sell it to people in New Zealand. But I'm joking there, by the way. But I really love the fact that, that Te Reo Māori is having an impact on English, that people might be using elements of taonga puoro and mōtetia in their waiata, because that shows our influence. It shows that people are digging what we do, and long may that continue. And we shouldn't be afraid of that, because if we want to be global citizens, if we want to see the uptake of our language and our culture, then we've got to give.
Kia ora, kia ora. You talk around this very confidently. You yourself, as a Māori contemporary artist, have you done that yourself with some of your compositions?
Yeah, I have. And I can remember when I was with Aotearoa, right? Well, one of the things that we were looking at, and if the band had continued on, we would have been doing more mōtetia. And in the second album we did, there's one there which I think goes, E tu, e tama ki te mura o te ahi, right? And that was something that we were starting to do and really, really starting to incorporate into our music. And another song called Māoritanga on there, which was our kind of attempt to do, more my kind of attempt to do a Hedney, but about an octave higher than Hedney. And we were starting to do that then, but we didn't last too much after 1989-90 because I moved home and then became a father, and that became the biggest thing in my life, rightly so too. But, we were starting to it back then, and I think when I look at the music now and I see what's happening, and particularly the work that Hinewehi's done in terms of bringing people, into the Anthems project, it's one of the most wonderful things that we can fund, but it's having these huge rewards because music, good music, and music by well-known New Zealand artists gets everywhere. I know people got upset about Lord, for instance, but here's a stat, right? I'd be happy if 300 people listened to my music in a month. Lord had 30 million people listen to her Māori album in an afternoon, and that's the difference. That's how, and people say, she has to speak Māori all the time, and she's this and she's that and all the rest of it. Well, Lord, she took a huge risk, and her record company put a lot of money into doing that album. Mind you, some of it sounds suspiciously like Hinewehi, but look, it had a huge impact.
Yeah.
It had a huge impact, despite all the bad publicity, which was really a storm in a teacup. For most people, that was a wonderful thing that she did, and she did it for te reo. Not to make any money, she did it for te reo.
Kia ora, kia ora. Me mihi ka tika aia ki aia hoki. And exactly what Hiniwehi and many artists like yourself have been doing and will continue to do to help revitalise our language.
Yep. I mean, look, you look at somebody like Rob Ruha, for instance, right? I could tell he was a kapahaka performer the first time I saw him perform live. Rob has got this voice that is intrinsically kapahaka Māori, right? And he's got a heck of a range. And man, as a live performer now, he's incredible. You know, he's that was what, 2012, I think it was, when he was part of the Paupau Kaupapa. And now easily probably our most recognisable Māori artist. And but the thing I love about Rob, he's got te reo. He's come from a kapahaka background, and he incorporates that seamlessly into what he does. And now he's a pop artist as well.
Kia ora, tēnā koe. Just coming back to you there, Ngahi, we understand that you've done quite a few compositions yourself, e hoa, and here for He Reo Tawhito, you are going to be sharing one of your own compositions with us. Could you tell us a little bit about that composition?
Yeah, it's called I Toko Ake, and I decided I wanted to write a song for my children that reminded them where they were from. And it wasn't, the green grass of home or anything like that. I wanted it to be something that told them of the pride I had when they were born and the love I had for them, but also to know where they came from. So I remember thinking about the lyrics, because when I write in Māori, it's very quick. When I write in English, I tend to go off on a tangent when I speak in English, and I'm like that when I write in English. And then I get annoyed with myself and leave it alone and then come back about 2 years later. But once a song for me is ready to be written in Māori, it's really quick. And the thing is, I find it really, I suppose as somebody who grew up speaking Māori, I find it a lot easier to write in te reo than I do in English. Because in English, I'm trying to find too many flash words, right? But in Māori, I know what the words are. And, I toko aki ahau, i aroha mutu ngā kore, ne? Mō haura e hika e, i ata hipoki mai e, so, overcame me. Tihei mai tō waha e tama, when I first heard you cough and come alive. Tapa mai ana te puta ki te whai ao nei e declaring your arrival in the world. He tohu ora e, the signs of life. Oh, thank God for that, And because my youngest daughter's birth in particular was really difficult, and then I was worried I was going to lose them both. But look, hearing them cry and hearing their first cries is just such a relief. And then I talk about where we come from, and there's this famous story in Ngāti Porou of how Tamahai went up to the East Coast and infamously killed Hine Tāpura and her family. And Hine Tāpura and her family put themselves up before her iwi. She's one of our greatest martyrs. And Tamahai killed her family as well. He then went north to Tikitiki and caught up with Putanga. And Putanga, I think, is my 10th great-grandfather. Anyway, Putanga stood up there and thought, man, this fella's pretty tough. How am I going to get out of this? Can't run. Fella's too fast. Can't beat him in a fight. Give me a hiding. So what he decided to do was to quote his whakapapa. And he turned around to Tamahai and he said, he kōiwi tāua, no roto I te mara a tūmoana kōtore. We are bones from Tūmoana Kōtore's garden. And that's why Tamahai let him live. But apparently as Tamahai was going off, Putanga said quietly, e hara I a koe, not you though, as you do, when the tough fella's running around. So I put that in there as well. So, he koiwi tāua no roto I te mara tūmoana kōtore. And then into the full name of Poraurangi, which is quite a mouthful. Not quite tamate pokai whenua, but it's up there. Poraurari ki te matatara awhare tutuhi mare kura rauru. Koina, yeah.
Kua tata.
So nā porauari ki te matatara awhare tutuhi mare kura rauru koe. Nā tahu pōtiki koe. Nā koroa ora ke, nā tuahu, nā mahaki, nā tuahu, riri, So all of those South Island connections that my kids have, look, I'm the only wannabe ngaitahu in my whare. And I've told my mate after I did my DNA test, I've got heaps of tahu, second cousins and things. Nah, you're not. You're a dirty Ngāti, get back over there, right? Because I'm looking over there and I'm seeing all the cool things Ngātahu are doing, and I'm thinking, I must be related to them. But my children come from Kati Mahaki on the west coast, which is around Mahitahi Bruce Bay, Te Taipotini. And the older ones are from Tuahiri or Ngai Tuahiri. And so I wanted that in there. But I also wanted their connections back to the East Coast through Kahungunu, through my father, Tūrongo Wahine, to Ngāti Hine up north. And so, the last part of the way, it's only short. Kia tapu koe nā, what have I got over there? Kia tapu koe nā Panui, nā rongo mai wahine, nā hine amaru e whai nei te kahurangi, me te aroha nui nei e. And those things are really, really important because I've left the song so that as my mokopunas come in and they're born, they are able to add their iwi and their hapu and their tupuna in there as well.
Atahua.
And so I would hope that, if I was to come back in 100 years' time, that song had grown some legs and had some extra tipuna in it.
Koina te manako nui ni.
Well, koina.
Atahua ihoa, atahua. And thank you for sharing that. You did actually just briefly touch on too that he waiata poto, engari anei te hohonu o te whakamārama o tēnei waiata. So just with saying that, it's a guess, noi ho tēnei, when you were, I guess, in that composition flow and that, did you take a more of a traditional way of composition or did you just let the kariharoto flow?
Well, I think it's a bit of both, right? Because I think one of the things, like I watch people doing whai kōrero and you can tell, ones who are doing it for the first time, and, they're unhappy with themselves because they haven't done everything, right? And I was like that. I've been there and I've done that. But I've now been doing whai kōrero for close to 30 years. And so there's kind of like a zone you fall into. Even when I don't know what I'm going to say 5 minutes before I stand up, you get up and it all comes. It's just, it's like being at a tangi, for instance, and you have to do a mihi to the mate. You just know what to do because you've done it so many times. And I guess with writing my songs, it's a bit like that. And so, but the good thing is you have this general structure and you can pull things into it. And the story of Putanga was one of the more interesting ones because I'd never thought of Tūmona Kotori as having a garden. He koi wita, we're bones from the garden of Tūmona Kotori, right? And Tūmona Kotori was really important in our history because his grandson, Tū Whakairiora, was the one who went around and wiped out a whole village. And look, when I was younger, I was thinking, I'm going to name my kid after that. And then when I found out what he did, I went, no, I'm not going to do that. But his, Tūmona Kotori, they thought he was dead. That's where Tū Whakairiora got his name from, right? It's Tūmona Kotori I Whakairiora tia. Tūmona Kotori, who was hung up when he was still alive. So what happened was, they thought he was dead, the koroa, and they took him into the bush and put him up in a tree as they did back in the day. And as they were walking back, they heard, "Hey, tuku au ki raro. Hey, let me down." Because he was still up in the tree alive. He must have been in a coma or something or in a deep sleep. And that's where the name came from, Tū Whakairiora. It's a shortening of Tūmona Kotori I Whakairiora tia. And so it was really, really a nice way to bring that in and that connection in as well.
Ātaua. And your children, I'm sure, will find the benefits in it. Nā reira, me whakamānoa tia I tērā o ngā waiata au. You've explained to us, Ewa, like ngā whakamārama behind it, the whakapapa within it as well. What's its significance, though? Why have you brought it to us here for He Reo Tawhito?
Well, it's because it's one of mine, and I can talk about one of mine with confidence, right? Because it'd be a nightmare to talk about irangi rai and somebody else going, nah, that's not what it is. At least I can say, well, you can't argue with me about what my one means because I wrote the bloody thing, right? and look, and for me, it is the one song from that album that I keep singing, because it means that's who we are. For the kids, I can remember my mate saying to me several years ago, we need to teach the kids a song that we can all sing when we go to the marae together, and how prophetic those words are, right? And that's the song she wants us to sing. There's another song which is about Tahu Pōtiki, the link between Tahu Pōtiki and Poraurangi, called E Taunei, which was on my third album. Oh, no, sorry, my second album. Oh, getting a bit old now. And, you know, E Taunei au ki te pai, e whakahuana i te whakapapa, hono ai te rāwhiti me te tonga, e. And it's all about Tahu Pōtiki, but more about hamo. Or hemo, as they call it. Hamo tū ki te rangi in Ngāti Porou on the East Coast, and hemo tū ki te rangi in Ngaitahu. And I said to them, you fellas do know what hemo means, eh? And look, it's that because, you know, it's about her being the mother of the you know, te whae o te motu, ne? Because there are all these iwi that have come out of a very small place just out of Gisborne called Whangara, right? And we all trace our origins back to Paikea. And I think that was part of it too, was bringing that in, because often we focus on our differences and not enough on our commonalities. And if there's one thing that I wanted to do with my waiata, is to focus on commonalities.
Beautiful.
You know, things that bring us together, things that unite us, regardless of whether we're Māori, whether we're Pākehā, whatever, you know. These commonalities are really, really important to us, you know, staying together, keeping alive. And the more we focus on them, the better we are.
Yeah, kia ora. With you talking around that with your compositions and the commonalities and all the types of kaupapa that you bring into your waiata, have you ever received critique, and how have you received that critique?
Yeah, I've received critique. And, you know, and some of that's from the old people. And I received that very graciously, right? Because often they're motivated by, you know, something to put you right rather than to slap you around the ears, and I appreciate that, but I also appreciate the feedback of some of my friends as well, because one thing I do know, and I probably learned this about 30 years ago, is I don't know everything. I wish I did, but I don't. And one of the reasons you have a team, right? It's like in a band. Like I would do this music. And I had this little 8-track back in the 80s, and I think I got it from Capital Music or something, which used to be down in Courtenay Place. And playing away with it, making what I thought was cool music. The production was crap because it was a cassette, right? And so I played everything on it and bounced it down, which makes it sound degrade even more on cassette tape. Bounced it down, done a mix, think, wow, first play, man, that's awesome. Second play, oh, no, don't know if I like that. Played it back again. Oh, no, definitely something wrong with that. So you ring up to all your mates. Bros, you want to come around and jam this song? They come around. You got a real bass player, a real drummer, not a drum machine. You know, a real keyboard player, not your crappy 2-finger things. And all of a sudden, boom, your song's alive. It sounds beautiful. And that's what I love about playing music, right? It's not about the process, things you can do. It's about the music you can make with your friends, and the harmonies you can do, and the vocals you can do. Those are the things that I really, really love. And then there's nothing better when you're playing pop music than to have a brass section. You know, and you go, woohoo, you know. And Earth, Wind and Fire, all the way from Wellington. And but, you know, it's that teamwork that makes things happen in a band, right? You know, if the what's that, Jim Morrison, if his band was all about him only, it wouldn't quite have worked, right? If the Beatles were all just about Paul McCartney, it wouldn't have worked. And the same with Herbs too. You know, Herbs, I heard some commentary that Herbs, in their last iteration when they did Long Ago in those albums, were just a show band. What a load of rubbish. They were a brilliant bunch of musicians. I played several times with them, and they inspired me and the other guys to play really, really well, because we realised how high the mountain was when we played with them the first time. We thought we were cool, you know, playing all our humbug reggae, and then we heard them and went, oh, okay, you know, that's how good we got to get, right? And these are the things, right? Having a team, having a bunch of people playing with you. The writing is very, very, you know, it's solitary. Yeah. Unless, of course, you've got a good mate you can write songs with and you won't give each other a hiding after 8 hours. But it's the band that brings the song alive. And it's the singer that sings your lyrics and you know, and transports that melody to the audience that determines how great that thing is. You know, in a recent example, I wrote, I had this song which I'd written in the 80s, which is about going to nightclubs, and called Waiting on a Moment. And as I said, you know, with English songs that I'd written, I used to get really ho-ha with them because I didn't think they were quite right. Well, I found it again and tried to rewrite it and redo it, and I thought, oh, God, You know, I'm far too old to be singing about this stuff. And
You're not nightclubbing anymore,
no,
then, eh?
hell no. We barely go to a pub, mate. Anyway, so I decided that I'd write some Māori lyrics for it. And those lyrics took me probably about half an hour to an hour, because I knew what I wanted to write it about, you know, and that's the He Aroha song that Tony released, last year. And that for me was a triumph because the lyrics came so quickly, like they've been waiting 30 years going, hey, bro, hey, big ears, you know. And finally I got it done, and I was really proud of that, and I still am, and I'm proud of what we did in the studio. I thought it was a beautiful song, beautiful build, beautifully produced by Matrix, hey Andy, and you know, so it's that type of thing that I really love. Like I can spout on about my musical, you know, ideology till the cows come home, but what it comes down to is what you do when you get out there and play, or when you get out there and you record. So, you know, really, really important for me to receive the input of others rather than go, oh, no, it's my song. Go away. It's my song, not yours. Well, actually, yeah, it is your song, bro. But the less input you take and the more defensive you get, the worse, a worse product you're going to get. And so if there's something dumb about a song, I want to hear it, you know. That's where I've gotten to. I've got no ego about this stuff anymore because, you know, ego kills things. Sometimes it's good, right? But I've found more often than not, the more I take the advice of others, good advice of others, the more often I get a good result.
Tāua tērā. Even though we are taking on that advice and that with some of the mahi that you do, have you found it maybe sometimes lead you astray from your original whakaaro of your composition?
Yeah, well, that's because it was he katoa taku whakaaro i te tuatahi, right? You know, because I wasn't thinking about stuff, right? And I'll be thinking, oh, here's a reggae song, and somebody goes, no, bro, that'd be better as a rock song. No. And then they play it and go, oh, okay, or a funk song or whatever, right? And look, you know, and you've got to be prepared to open yourself up to those things, because if you don't, then you could be killing your song, you know. And I've heard some originals that have been done, which were okay, and then somebody redoes them and I go, whoa, listen to that.
Right.
You know, mind you, I've heard a lot of remakes, and then I heard the original and go,
Actually, now that we're talking about remakes, we've actually had a lot of our mōtetia go through, I guess, some kind of a remix in that. What's your whakaaro on those mōtetia, especially waiata tawhito or waiata korauā nei, who have gone through a bit of a remake?
Yeah, I've heard a couple of them. One of the more interesting ones was in the front of the Kahal song, you know, which where Rob took bits from the Ruaumoko haka, the most graphic bits, I must say. You know, because the Ruaumoko haka is a man describing his journey, well, the process of him having sex with a woman and what he's doing. And right at the end, it gets that korenu wata, you know, and thrusting upwards and thrusting deeply and things like that. And he's singing it like it's a child's, a child's nursery rhyme. And I'm thinking to myself, you're either being really mischief there, Mr. Rob, or really clever. And so I've heard that done. I think Whirimako did a version of E Pātohau, which I found really, really interesting. And I don't think anybody else could have pulled off. And so what she did was anglicised it, right? She went the other way. And I thought that was really, really interesting. But these are the types of, experiments we've got to be open to. Because, you know, if we're not, then our music stays in the same place. And music is like reo, it develops, and it changes.
Pretty simple, ne? And thank you for putting it down in that very simple way that our music, especially mōtetia, is a way of sort of letting it grow, letting it breathe, and letting it move with the times. E te kāna tērā kōrero?
Yeah. Well, it has to, otherwise it dies. You know, it's like our language. You know, you keep it to a few. Those few die, they die with the language, right? And it's the same with music. The least people you let into the whare to play with you, the least likely the music's like to live on. So really, really important to be inclusive, and that's, you know, that's what we do. I remember somebody saying to me, "Hey, bro, what's the point of a whai kōrero?" And I'm saying, well, you know, whai kōrero have something to say. Yeah, but what's the point of it? And I'd heard people talk about whai kōrero as being, oh, we're there to tell the stories of the area. No, you're not. Right? That's just blowing. You know, kāre te kumarai e kōrero mo tōna reka. What you're there to do when you get up to speak on the marae is to draw the... One, first of all, to me, because my koroa used to tell me that's the most powerful thing we have. Somebody could be coming to kill you and you go, e te rangatira, tēnā koe, don't mai hara mai, please don't kill me. No, you know, and because you've acknowledged their mana, they're not going to do anything to you, right? And then the second part of it, a really, really important part, is the whakawhanaungatanga, right? Finding the commonalities, the whakapapa, the common experiences that bring you together, that make you whānau. That's why it's called a whakatau, right? So, it's a real simple thing. And, it's like simple things like don't sit on the table and, and all that kind of stuff. And you can come up with all sorts of stories around it. But when you talk to the old people and you listen and you think, even if you just think about it, it's hygiene.
Tika, kia ora. Well, te rapeo ko tai te wā kia whakakōpani, kia whakatepe I tēnei kōrero me te pārika reka. And I must say thank you for adding a bit of humour to this kōrero e hoa, because sometimes we take mōtetia so serious. Ne? I wareware tātou, as you said at the beginning, hei katakata.
Well, the thing for me, right, is I've heard Māori for me has always been fun, whether it's been my aunties getting smart to each other in the kauta at Henerupe Marae, or whether, like one of the things I hate when I was a kid is I'd be running around and I'd fall over. And my uncles, instead of coming to pick me up and go, "You all right, boy?" They go, "Boy, mau ia koe tō kiore." It used to piss me off, right? or, "Boy, kare mau te kehua te whai." That one used to really get me, right? And then I'd be dazed and bruised and bleeding at the knees. They'd be cracking jokes and getting smart. Catch a ghost? Catch a rat? And I'll be lying there going, "I hate you."
That's the aroha, though.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? And a Ngāti Porou whai kōrero isn't a good one without a joke. You got to have at least two in there. And so I grew up around people who were laughing all the time. I went back to a tangi 3 or 4 years ago at Tina Toka Marae, and I took a couple of my staff with me. And they were just aghast at the number of jokes that were told in the whai kōrero about the tūpapaku. And we were driving back to Gisborne, and they were going, "There was a tangi, wasn't it?" I said, "Yeah." "But they were telling jokes about the dead person." And I said, "Yeah, because that's the best time to tell jokes about them, because they can't answer back." And that's the Ngāti Porou thing, right?
Tika.
But you need to laugh during tangi, right? Because they're so heavy. 3 days of mourning, and you watch somebody come back from a tangi, you think they've been drinking for 3 days, right? Because it's expunging all of that emotion. One of the most traumatic things for me at a tangi, especially if it's your own whānau, is the closing of the coffin on the last day.
Kia ora.
Because you're not going to touch them and see them again, right? And there's a purpose behind all of that. Get all that emotion out, get it all out, let them go, send them on their way, and then there's a period. Hey, that's it. They're gone.
Koia. Well, luckily, for now, kai konei tonu koe, me tō waiata.
A pōpō pia ka mate.
Oh, kaua e pērā e hoa. O tira, kia koutou e mātaki mai nā. We're very honoured to have you here with us e hoa, and about to listen to your motu e tea. Nā wano I tito mō tamariki, and hopefully, like you said, in 100 years' time, ka hoki mai koe, ka hoki mai tātou katoa, ki te whakarongo ki tēnei mō tētea. Ngā hiwi apanui, tēnā rawa atu koe e hika.
Tēnā rawa atu koe nōku te honore, te waimari e hoki, te kōrero ki a koe I tēnei rā.
Tēnā koe, nā reira kia koutou katoa, kia mau, ki ngā reo tawhito, kia tawhito mai, tō tātou nei tuku, he reo tawhito, kia ora.
I toko aki a hau e, he aroha mutu ngā kore, mō haura e hika e, I a tahi poki mai e. Tihei mai tō waha e tama, tapa mai ana te puta ki te whai au nei e, he tohu ora e. He ko iwi tāua, no roto I te mara atu moana kōtore, I whakairiora tia rā e. Nā poroariki, te matatara a whare, te tuhi mare kuro rauru koe, nā tahu pōtiki koe, nā koro auraki, nā tua huriri e. Kia toa koe nā hine amaru, nā rongo mai wahine, nā panui, e whai nei te tika hurangi e. Me te aroha nui nei, Iei.
That was Ngāhiwi Apanui with I Toko Ake. Thank you, Ngāhiwi, for your wise words and for sharing with us how your life has been enriched by Mō Teatea. He Reo Tawhito, a series produced by Toi Te Ara Puoru, Sounds, Centre for New Zealand Music. All Mō Teatea have been provided courtesy of the artist. To find out more about today's episode or more about music of Aotearoa New Zealand, go to sounds.org.nz. That's sounz.org.nz. Ko Crystal Edwards, ahau. Thanks for watching. Hei konara mai.
Toi Te Ara Puoru, Sounds.